The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, but I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.
It's a story that we got from our friend Betsy Bible, who lives in Moscow, Idaho. And Betsy gave us permission to record it, and we'd like to tell it now. Everybody knows the story of the little red hen who found some seeds and asked her friends to help her plant them.
But this story is about her cousin, the little red bossy hen, who thought she knew what was best for all the other animals.
Now, there is a song in this story, and wherever you are, we hope you'll sing along.
Once upon a time, in a barnyard far, far away, there lived a little red hen who was very bossy. She would strut around the barnyard all day long and tell all the other animals what to do, how to live their lives.
Bossy hen, little red bossy hen. Bossy hen, little red bossy hen. Knows what's best for the rest, such a little barnyard pest, little red bossy hen.
Now, one day, that little red bossy hen danced right over to the duck pond, and there was the duck out there swimming around looking for his food. And the bossy hen clucked, "Bawk, bawk, 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 bawk. You know, I don't know why you swim around this pond looking for your dinner. Don't you know that water isn't good for your feathers? And besides, you could drown. Now, if you want to find some food, you should come out here on the land and scratch in the dirt like I do. That's what you should do."
And because the hen was so demanding, the duck believed her. He never went swimming in that pond again.
Bossy hen, little red bossy hen. Bossy hen, little red bossy hen. Knows what's best for the rest, such a little barnyard pest, little red bossy hen.
The very next day, that little red bossy hen pranced right over to the pig as he was rolling around in the mud, and she clucked, "Bawk, bawk, 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 bawk." Now, Joe, I know you're ready to do that with me. So
I am. You are such a good bossy hen, I can't get over it.
And she said to that pig, "You know, that's a filthy habit you have, rolling around in that mud. Look at you, you're covered with dirt. Now, if you want to roll around in something, you should roll around in the dry dust of the barnyard like I do. You'd certainly smell a whole lot better."
And because the hen was so persistent, the pig believed her. He rolled around in the dry dust of the barnyard all day long as the hot sun broiled his skin. He was baking.
Bossy hen, little red bossy hen. Bossy hen, little red bossy hen. Knows what's best for the rest, such a little barnyard pest, little red bossy hen.
The third day, that little red bossy hen capered right over to the cow as she was giving milk, and she clucked, "Bawk, bawk, 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 bawk. You know, I don't know why you give milk. Everybody knows that eggs are much better for you. I know. Why don't you try to lay an egg? Oh, don't look at me like that. You could do it if you tried. You see that nest of straw over there? You just sit down on that nest of straw and try to lay an egg."
And because the hen was so commanding, the cow believed her. She sat down on a nest of straw and tried to lay an egg.
Bossy hen, little red bossy hen. Bossy hen, little red bossy hen. Knows what's best for the rest, such a little barnyard pest, little red bossy hen.
Now, also living on that farm was a goose. And the goose saw that duck trying to scratch in the dirt for his food like a chicken and thought,
How silly.
he saw the pig rolling around in the dry dust of the barnyard like a pig and thought,
How silly.
he saw the cow sitting on a nest of straw trying to lay an egg like a chicken and thought,
How silly. And then that goose waddled over to the duck and honked, "Mwah, mwah. If I were you, I'd swim in the pond to find my dinner. Look at you. Your feet are shaped like paddles for swimming in the water, not like claws for scratching in the dust. You should do what you do best."
So the duck got back into the pond and oh, that water felt so good, he swam figure eights all the rest of the day.
And then that goose waddled over to the pig and honked, "Mwah, mwah. If I were you, I'd roll in the mud to keep cool. Look at you. You're not covered with fur or feather. The hot sun burns your skin. You should do what you do best."
So the pig got back into the mud and ooh, it felt so cool and delicious, he hasn't come out of there since.
And then that goose waddled over to the cow and honked, "Mwah, mwah." The sight of you, a cow, sitting on a nest of straw is so crazy that I wonder why people call me a silly goose. Why, you couldn't lay an egg if you tried for a year. Look at you. You're a cow. Cows give milk. You should do what you do best.
So the cow stood up and milk started pouring out. She felt utterly wonderful.
As for that little red bossy hen, why, she's back out in the barnyard trying to convince the cat to crow like a rooster. She's never learned that you should always do what you do best.
Bossy hen, little red bossy hen, bossy hen, little red bossy hen, knows what's best for the rest, such a little barnyard pest, little red bossy hen.
It was a difficult thing to live next to my grandfather, Ratmeyer, E.H. Ratmeyer. Grandpa and Grandma lived right next door to us, and my mother, until her dying day, would lament the early years of their marriage because my grandfather was very punctual about everything, and there was only one way to do everything, the right way, and you learned from him that what the right way was, and that's the way you did it. When my parents got married, there are stories that my grandfather would take a long bamboo pole and rap on the window and say, "There's a light on in the basement," at 2 o'clock in the morning. At 6 o'clock, if he wasn't out of bed and going to work, there'd be a rap on the window. "What's wrong up there? It's 6 o'clock." Even though he wasn't supervising my father, had nothing to do with his work. So he was, let's say, a bit controlling and slightly rigid. When I was 5 years old, he invited me, just before I turned 6 that summer, he invited me to go fishing with him. So it was quite an honor, and my parents primed me, now always do what Grandpa says, be very cautious, don't make too much noise, etc., etc. So my grandmother packed a wonderful lunch for us, and we headed off to Leaf River to fish. Now, my grandfather was particular about fishing as he was with everything else. His garden, the lines were perfectly straight. When you went fishing with my grandfather, I learned you didn't slam the car door. You pushed it carefully shut. You didn't talk. You whispered. And you didn't just walk right up to the stream. You would crawl up. And so the fish couldn't see you. You would throw your line in and be hidden back there. The only thing you were allowed, because he was a cork fisherman, he always had this bobble out there, and when the cork bobbled, you knew you had a fish, and you would pull it in. In my excitement, getting out of the car and carrying a few things, we got near the creek, and I stood up, and I just ran forward to take a look. And the soil right near the edge of the bank gave way, and I flipped head over till I landed in the creek. Splash! Now, I couldn't swim. It was a very deep hole. And I yelled, and my grandfather used the same old bamboo pole he had used to rap on my parents' windows, and he held it down. He said, "Hang on." And the hook actually got caught in my clothes, and he kind of pulled me over to land, like landing a whale or a carp or something. I could tell he was disgusted. I could see that, and I knew I'd made a terrible mistake. And I didn't know what he would do about that. But he was kind. He said, just sit over here on that stone. It's sunny, and it was a warm, breezy day. You'll dry out. And then he told my dad later, he said, I just about gave up and went home, but the kid was so wet, I couldn't put him in the car. So he thought he would just throw a line in. He baited his hook, he threw it in, and almost instantaneously pulled out a bass, a rare fish in those waters, a beautiful, large bass. He was just amazed, and he put it in the bucket, and he threw the line in quickly again, 3 times. And he had, within 15 minutes, he had 3 beautiful bass. He'd never caught anything like that in his life. And then he started catching a few other things, a few bullheads, a carp, some other odd kinds of fish. And so we had a bucket nearly full, and when we went home, he was in a great mood. And what he said on the way back was, now, you don't have to mention anything about falling in the creek. I wouldn't say anything about that. I said, oh, okay. Whew, I was quite relieved because I was thinking, how am I going to tell my parents that I muffed up the whole day? I didn't realize what a blessing Grandpa had in those fish. We got home, not a word was said. I talked about the wonderful trip. People admired the fish. We had fish that night. A couple of weeks later, I just felt obliged to tell my parents. I fell in the creek when I was fishing with Grandpa, and they said, no. I said, what did he do? Well, he was pretty upset, but he just told me to sit on that rock, and I did, and then he got these fish right away. And so my dad went to my grandfather, and he said, he told me later, he said, I understand that Harlan fell in the creek when he went fishing with you. He said, yeah, I was so upset with him. You know, kid comes over there, jumps up, down, makes all that noise, and then falls right in the creek. I knew it was going to be a terrible fish day, but he was too wet. I couldn't put him in the car and come home, so I just threw my line in, and I caught 3 of the best fish I've ever caught in my life. And my dad said, wow, oh. My grandpa mumbled under his breath, yeah, he says, I like to take him along more often and throw him in before I start to fish. And the rest of his life, and he lived till he was 96, the rest of his life. Every so often he'd say, remember the day we went fishing? I said, oh, I remember. But for several years after that event, until I was maybe 9 or 10, my grandfather would look at me very fondly, and I often wondered, does he really love me? Does he care about me? Or does he just see me as potentially very good fish bait?
And this is probably our favorite story, and it's pretty popular with our audiences too. And there's a little interaction in it, and we'd be happy to have you interact.
Fun.
Once, there was a little green animal. He had big bulgy eyes, webbed feet, and he lived in a swamp. What do you think it was?
A frog? I think it was a frog.
It was a frog, but it wasn't just any frog. It was a wide-mouthed frog.
Wide.
Now, this little wide-mouthed frog, he was such a happy little guy. He ate what he wanted to eat. He swam when he wanted to swim. And when he wanted to sing, he had his very own song. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog, ribbit, ribbit. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog, croak, croak. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog, I live in the swamp near the bog. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog. Well, now one day that little wide-mouthed frog was just sitting there on his lily pad, and on the next lily pad over from him was his mama. Now she was making him some supper. You know what she was making him? Fly stew with mashed mosquitoes and dragonfly wing gravy. That little wide-mouthed frog just loved those foods. But you know, he was a very curious little fellow, and he wondered what other animal mothers fed their babies. So he decided to take a hop through the jungle and find out. He just hopped on off of that lily pad and started hopping down that jungle trail. And as he did, he sang his song.
I'm a little wide-mouthed frog, ribbit, ribbit. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog, croak, croak. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog, I live in the swamp near the bog. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog.
Now that little wide-mouthed froggy was hopping down that trail, and all of a sudden he saw an animal. Now this animal was very tall. It had long legs with knobby knees and a long neck, and its head was way up in the trees. What do you think it was?
A giraffe?
It was a giraffe, but it wasn't just any giraffe. It was a mother giraffe, and she had 2 giraffe babies. And that little wide-mouthed frog, he called up to that mother giraffe. He said, "Oh, mother giraffe, what do you feed your babies?" And the mother giraffe said, "Why, I feed my babies tender green leaves from the tops of the trees. Would you like to stay for supper?" Well, the wide-mouthed frog thought about that, and he said, "Not today, maybe another day, but thank you anyway." And he hopped away, and as he hopped, he sang his song. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog, ribbit, ribbit. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog, croak, croak. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog, I live in the swamp near the bog. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog. Now that little wide-mouthed frog, he was hopping down that jungle trail, and all of a sudden, another animal slithered right across the path in front of him. What do you think it was?
Snake.
It was a snake, but it wasn't just any snake. It was a mother snake, and she had 3 snake babies. Now that little wide-mouthed frog, he called out to that mother snake. He said, "Oh, mother snake, what do you feed your babies?" And the mother snake said, "I feed my babies mice and rats and other little furry creatures. Would you like to stay for supper?" Well, the wide-mouthed frog thought about that, and he said, "Not today, maybe another day, but thank you anyway." And he hopped away. And as he hopped, he sang his song. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog, ribbit, ribbit. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog, croak, croak. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog, I live in the swamp near the bog. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog. Well, that little wide-mouthed frog, he kept hopping down that jungle trail, and all of a sudden, he heard a noise from up overhead. He looked up, and there was an animal up there, swinging from branch to branch. What do you think it was?
It wasn't an elephant. It must have been a
Monkey.
It was a monkey, but it wasn't just any monkey. It was a
Mother monkey.
and she had 4 monkey babies. And that little wide-mouthed frog, he called up to that mother monkey, and he said, "Oh, mother monkey, what do you feed your babies?" And the mother monkey said, "I feed my babies bananas. Ripe, juicy bananas. You want to stay for supper?" Well, the wide-mouthed frog thought about that, and he said, "Not today, maybe another day, but thank you anyway." And he hopped away. And as he hopped, he sang his song. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog, ribbit, ribbit. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog, croak, croak. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog, I live in the swamp near the bog. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog. Well, now that little wide-mouthed frog kept on hopping till he came to a river. And he went right up to the edge of that river, and he looked down into that water, and he saw an animal in there. He saw 2 eyes bulging up above the surface of the water, and just below the surface was a long snout with lots of teeth. What do you think it was?
Ooh, was it a crocodile?
It was a crocodile, but it wasn't just any crocodile. It was a mother crocodile, and she had 5 crocodile babies. And that little wide-mouthed frog, he called out to that mother crocodile. He said, "Oh, mother crocodile, what do you feed your babies?" And the mother crocodile said, "I feed my babies wide-mouthed frogs. You want to stay for supper?" Ooh, that little wide-mouthed frog, he didn't have to think about that. He said, "Not today, maybe another day, but thank you anyway," and hopped away real fast. And as he hopped, he sang a different song. I'm a little small-mouthed frog, ribbit, ribbit.
I'm a little smallmouth frog, croak, croak. I'm a little smallmouth frog, I live in the swamp near the bog. I'm a little smallmouth frog.
Well, when that little wide-mouthed frog got back to his lily pad, whew, was he relieved. And you know, his mama had his supper all ready for him. So he sat right down on that lily pad and ate every single bit of that fly stew with mashed mosquitoes and dragonfly wing gravy. Mama, he said, that was the best supper I ever had. Those are all my favorites. And you know, after that, that little wide-mouthed frog wasn't quite so curious. But he always sang his song. Let's sing it one more time.
I'm a little wide-mouthed frog, ribbit, ribbit. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog, croak, croak. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog, I live in the swamp near the bog. I'm a little wide-mouthed frog.
Wonderful.
Two of my grandchildren, twins, are now in their second year of college. But when they were 5 years old, about the time, the age I was when I fell into the creek, it was Christmas Eve, and I had been down in Albany conducting a service, left here late, and drove up to Montpelier where they live. It was a beautiful night, starry night. Some snow had fallen earlier in the evening, so there was just a little white flakes on the road, stirring up dust storms behind me as I drove along. Arrived there about 2:30 in the morning, emptied the car, filled the stockings with various things, and was going to crawl in and get some sleep. Now, what I had done a couple days before, walking through the mall, I found little bags of coal. So I bought one, and I put it in my own stocking. And then I went to bed. Well, about 6 o'clock in the morning, of course, the kids were up, and Christopher and Sarah always came down and kind of shook me and said, Are you awake? Are you sleeping yet? Shh, you may be sleeping. And of course, by that time, I'm wide awake. So we assembled as soon as we could get my daughter and her husband and my mother, who was also visiting up there, get everybody around. We started opening presents. And at some point, one of the twins, I believe it was Sarah, reached into my stocking and to get me something. And she said, "What's that?" And I took it and I said, oh, well, that's coal. That's coal in Grandpa's stocking, a little coal. And I put it down, and I looked up, and here, tears running down their faces, and they came over and they hugged me. And they said, "Grandpa, you shouldn't have coal in your stock." I said, and now my mother was sitting straight across from me. I was on the floor with the kids, and she's looking at me. The children are looking this way and hugging me, but my mother's looking right at me, and she's going like this. What a nasty trick you did there. And I was swept away by the way they reacted. They were just grief-stricken. And I said, well, Grandpa did make a few mistakes this year. His desk, if you would look at it, is very messy. And I think that coal is a reminder for me to kind of straighten up and fly right and get my desk cleaned up. And because I got other nice things. And they sort of bought into that. At the same time, through the rest of the day, every so often they'd come up and they'd pat my hand a little. Grandpa, you're a good grandpa. And things like that. So through the day, I keep wondering about why the strong reaction to that, except Christmas is a time that's filled with stories of pathos out of which pleasantness and beauty happen. This always doesn't start in a castle. It starts in an empty barn or a manger with a poor child, and adversity comes, and yet we resist that. And I think the coal may stand as, even for the child that don't exactly know what it is, it's just that we don't want anything bad to happen, and we don't want anybody we know to fall down or to be bad in some way. And so I live humbly with that little sack of coal and remember that It nearly crashed a Christmas when my grandchildren were 5 years old.
Well, this story is from Egypt. It's our adaptation of an Egyptian folktale, and it's our understanding that all Egyptian school children are told this story. We call it The Lions at the Door. Once, in a little village in Egypt, there lived a farmer who was very hard-working. Every day he would go outside the village to his fields, and he would hoe and rake and plant and weed, and at night he'd go home to share the evening meal with his daughter, whose name was Fatma.
One day, the farmer was hard at work in his fields when all of a sudden, a little gray mouse came scurrying by. Now this mouse was a troublemaker. He saw the farmer, and at the edge of a nearby river, he saw some sleeping lions.
The mouse thought that this would be the perfect opportunity for making trouble. So he twitched his whiskers and scurried over to where the farmer was working. He said, "Hey, you see those lions asleep over there by the river? That big one says that he's stronger than you are."
The farmer scowled at that mouse. Do you think I'm foolish? Why, of course that lion is stronger than I am.
Oh, his plan for making trouble was not working. But this was a mouse who did not give up easily. He stamped his little mouse feet, twitched his whiskers again, and scurried over to the lions. He went up to the biggest lion and began tugging on his whisker. And as you can imagine, the lion woke up. And the mouse said quickly, "Hey, you see the farmer in the field over there? He says that he's stronger than you are." "Well, we'll just see about that," said the lion. And he charged at the farmer.
The farmer had no idea why that lion was charging at him, but running away suddenly seemed like a good idea. That farmer ran home, rushed into his house, slammed the door, and locked it.
The lion came rushing up to the door and began beating on it with his big furry fists. "Come out and fight like a lion," he called.
Fight like a lion? Fatma, did you hear that? What can we do?
"Father," said Fatma, "I have an idea. I have a pot of hot water on the fire. I'll go upstairs with that pot of hot water to the window over the front door. Now, I won't be able to see the lion because of the roof over the door, but if you stay down here and call up to me when you see that the water will hit the lion, then I'll pour the water out."
So Fatma went upstairs with the pot of hot water and waited by the window. When her father saw that the lion wasn't protected by the roof, he sang out,
Pour, Fatma, pour, the lion's at the door, the lion's at the door, pour, Fatma, pour.
Fatma dumped that pot of hot water out the window. It hit the lion, who yelped and ran off with a burned bottom.
The farmer congratulated his daughter for her cleverness. That's the last we'll see of that lion.
But 3 days later, the farmer was working in his fields when he looked up and saw a whole pride of lions coming slowly towards him. They all had huge grins on their faces, and the biggest one had a bandage on his bottom.
Oh no, cried the farmer, and he started running away in the opposite direction. Unfortunately, the lions were between him and his house. The farmer didn't know where to go or how to hide. But then he saw a tall tree. When he reached that tree, he climbed straight up as fast and as far as he could go. Whew, that was close.
The lions all made a big circle around the bottom of the tree, and they looked up at the farmer and roared.
The farmer clung to the top of that tree, looked down at those lions. I'll just wait here. I'll wait here the rest of my life if I have to.
Well, I don't know if you know anything about lions, but they're not big on patience. So they got into a big huddle for a planning session. And when they were finished, they looked up at that farmer and grinned.
And then the first lion sat right down next to the tree trunk.
The second lion climbed up onto the first lion's back.
The third lion climbed up onto the second lion's back.
The fourth lion climbed up onto the third
The
lion's
fifth
back.
lion climbed up onto the fifth lion's back.
The
Fourth
sixth lion climbed up onto the fifth lion's
Those
back.
lions were getting closer and closer. The farmer was getting worried. His plan for waiting out the lions was not working.
And then, that last lion, you know, the one with the bandage on his bottom, looked up at the farmer and roared.
Oh no, thought the farmer. I better come up with a new plan right away or else.
As that last lion began climbing up all the other lions, the farmer sang out, "Poor Fatma, poor, the lions at the door, the lions at the door, poor Fatma, poor."
And that lion, remembering what had happened the last time he heard that song, ran away as fast as he could, and the other lions followed.
And the farmer, who turned out to be just as clever as his daughter Fatma, climbed back down that tree and walked home singing. Poor Fatma, poor, the lions at the door, the lions at the door, poor Fatma, poor. Now, I bet you're wondering about that mouse. Well, he watched the whole thing from a safe distance away, hidden behind some tall grass. And when he saw that farmer outwit all those lions, ooh, he was mad. He stamped his little mouse feet, twitched his whiskers, and began thinking of a new way for making trouble.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.